don't know if it's contemporaneous or sort of running in parallel to this, or where does it intersect, is this whole story that came out, I guess, maybe it was the beginning of the week. For the life of me, I can't even remember now. It was
time has no meaning anymore.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, that's the thing that amazes me about what must be going on in these prosecutors' offices, where they just like, we're going to need another wall to put our little cue card, our little index cards up there. But the relationship between this guy Nader and Broidy and the Clown Prince, apparently, as he's called, Jared Kushner, and their dealings with the Saudis and UAE, it seems like, I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? Like, we're open for business. We don't discriminate who our clients are. We're going to take money from everybody. There's no reason. But where is the crossover there? Or is it just like, it just happens to be another bit of corruption?
No, there is a crossover, and it's important to remember that there's a crossover. Although, I mean, this is the point I keep making about the Halper story. It's like the Trump administration, the Trump campaign was willing to entertain financial or somehow other beneficial offers from Russian spies, Israeli spies, Emirates spies, Saudi spies, Turkish spies, Qatari spies. I think I'm missing one. 6, 7 different countries of spies. The only one they're offended by is that somebody from the FBI would come in to investigate these 7 other countries worth of spies. That's what the Trump argument is, that he's okay entertaining, listening to offers from 7 countries, from the spies of 7 countries. But if America's law enforcement decides to get in on the act, to figure out what's going on, that's what is offensive to Donald Trump. So that's where we're at. So the connection, so basically Donald Trump was offered the same thing the Russians were offering, campaign help in the form of basically information operations run by an Israeli guy who's tied, again, to their spies. And we'll have to see whether Mueller can prove that he did that. George Nader is this guy who also is a spy. I mean, he's been an informant for the FBI and CIA going back years to work off child porn charges. Donald Trump is okay hanging out with George Nader, but not okay hanging out with Stephen Halper. And what's interesting about it, you're right. This proves that the Trump administration was interested in pay-to-play from everybody. It also, by the way, proves when Don Jr. was interviewed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, they just released those transcripts last week because time has no meaning. He's asked very specifically, did any other country offer to help you? Did you have other meetings with people from any other country to help win the election? And he says very clearly, he says no. Well, that's a lie. Now so one thing we now know is that he lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee after having been warned that that's a crime.
Now, was he involved in those meetings with the Saudis
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep. So he took a pitch from the Saudis and Emirates, and then in 2017, when he was interviewed by a Senate Judiciary Committee, he's asked, did any foreign governments any other foreign governments offer or provide assistance to the Trump campaign? None that I'm aware of. He was personally in that meeting. Did any other foreign nationals offer or provide assistance to the Trump campaign? No. He was in that meeting. So that's a lie. If Chuck Grassley actually cared anything about oversight and justice, he would be referring Don Jr. right now for having lied to his committee.
Right.
He's not. But the other thing, you asked if there was a connection with the Russian thing, and yeah, there is, because in December, at the same time as Kushner is, entertaining offers from sanctioned Russian banks to get bailed out of stuff, and Kushner's also talking to Qataris and also talking to the Emirates, they set up a meeting in the Seychelles Islands in January, and there's actually a series of meetings in the Seychelles Islands. And it's not just the Russians. It's the Russians and Saudis and Emirates. There's some Israelis there, I think. There's even some South Africans there. So it was sort of this party on this island in the middle of the Indian Ocean where Eric Prince and a bunch of other people would entertain financial deals from basically these oligarchs of every sort. And it is believed, I think we're seeing the beginnings of the outlines. George Nader's closest to the Emirates. We're beginning to see outlines of the Emirates paying off the Trumps on behalf of the Russians. So in other words, the Emirates give you a way to pay off the Trumps in a way that might not be traceable to Russia as easily, if that makes sense.
Interesting. And that's almost like analogous to Brody paying Cohen to ostensibly pay off a Playmate model, right? Who ostensibly had an affair with Brody, but it's starting to look like that woman had an affair with Trump.
Right. These are all payments in kind. I mean, we don't know whether, not just an affair either. That woman had an abortion.
Right.
Right. But there's the beginning of an appearance of all of these pass-throughs, and that's the importance of Michael Cohen, right? So if you want to pay off Trump, you pay Michael Cohen, and who knows how much of that goes back to Trump or what's going back and forth. And we're going to start having a fight next week about how much of that literally is something a lawyer does and how much of that a co-conspirator does. Because, you know, Michael Cohen is supposed to be Trump, or was supposed to be before he got raided by the FBI. Michael Cohen was supposed to be Donald Trump's personal lawyer, but there's something called the crime fraud exception. If you're going to a lawyer precisely so you can break the law, then you no longer have attorney-client privilege. And there's something called a special master, a woman who used to be a prosecutor, who will wade through all of these files and decide what's actually privileged and what is not entitled to attorney-client privilege.
Is that process ongoing? Like, who has control of those documents at this time, and who has seen them? Who has control of them, and what will be the flow of those documents?
That is ongoing. There was supposed to be a meeting today that got delayed until next week, just to allow the special master more time to look. She has a huge volume of what was seized. And she is working at an incredible pace. Like she's been doing some updates to the judge and saying, you know, here's where I'm going to be at by May 24th. So that the first meeting on what gets counted as privileged and what doesn't will be next week. My understanding is those materials either exist exclusively in her hands or in both the prosecutors and in her hands, but they're not in Michael Cohen's. I guess Michael Cohen has copies, so he can decide whether it's privileged or not. But once the special master makes decisions, there may be fights over them, but anything there's not a fight over, then, and for example, I suspect there won't be a fight over the taxi medallion business. So once she says, you know, this taxi medallion business is just your business, that goes straight to the prosecutors, then the prosecutors are going to get it. And who knows whether they'll wait to receive everything or whether they'll start moving against Cohen right away.
Does the White House, if Michael Cohen has copies of everything, and is those copies provided by the special master essentially? Like here we have 100 boxes of documents. We're going to photocopy all of them. We're going to leave you 100 boxes. Does Michael Cohen then basically send those to the White House and the White House so that the White House lawyers can look at it and say, okay, this is what they've got. This is how we prepare for what's coming?
I think he gets to share anything that is possibly attorney-client privilege with Trump, or also with, the Trump organization too is getting involved. But they're legally different entities. Wow.
Okay. So, and is there anything from this sort of like, this is, is your house look like that Carrie Matheson set from Homeland? Like, do you have stuff like going threads going everywhere right now, Marcy? I just don't. The sheer volume of this stuff just seems unbelievable, and the nakedness of what they were doing. I mean, did they just think that they can't? I mean, what? I I'm asking for you to sort of divine intention and speculate on what was going through their minds. But I mean, it's just like a full on, we're just going to squeeze every dollar out of this thing, the White House that we can. Is that what was going on here?
Well, I mean, remember, they didn't think they were going to win. So, yeah, first they started by saying, yeah, we'll do anything to win, because they didn't think they were going to win. They were just, making deals. I think part of the problem is this is how Donald Trump has lived his life. Right? And I don't think that he or his spawn or his son-in-law or his, nominal personal lawyer, I don't think they can distinguish where things should change with the presidency. Right. And very importantly, I don't think they distinguish where their personal deal-making ends and where the foreign policy interests of the United States begins. And I think I've laid out in the past the same kind of conspiracy structure that Mueller has used against the Internet Research Agency and against Manafort. He could use, I'm not a lawyer, I'm certainly not his appellate lawyers, but he could use to say, if you are claiming to be doing the foreign policy business of the United States and instead you're taking bribes, that's a conspiracy. That's a conspiracy against the United States, and we're going to go after you for it. So I think, given what he has done, I could see him doing the same for all of this pay-to-play on foreign policy stuff.
Is there anybody who hasn't been interviewed? I mean, do we know for sure who has been interviewed by? I mean, obviously, I think we know probably in terms of the House and Senate intelligence committees, but do we know everybody that's been interviewed by Mueller? And
I'm sure we don't even know everyone who's been interviewed by the Senate Intelligence Committee. I'm sure we don't know. Because, for example, I know somebody who was interviewed and no one else knows about it, so I'm sure we don't know. And on Mueller, I'm also sure we have even less idea of everyone who was interviewed. I mean, let me remind you, the Internet Research Agency, the trolls, remember there was a guy who got paid to make a cage so there could be a fake Hillary in a cage at a campaign event? Remember that guy?
Okay, yeah, vaguely. Wait, he like an actual cage?
Yeah, it was all a stunt, campaign stunt. Okay. That guy was interviewed for 6 hours.
And
right? You don't know who that guy is. I don't know who that guy is, but that guy was interviewed for 6 hours. So the extent of these interviews, I mean, to some degree, the FBI was conducting a massive investigation already, but I don't think we can conceptualize the pure scope of what is being investigated here. Yes, we know the famous people close to Donald Trump who have been interviewed to the extent, I mean, remember, Mueller's team can't legally tell us who they're interviewing. I mean, they can't tell us anybody they've dragged before the grand jury.
Right.
And they're not telling us the other people they're interviewing. They've gone to great lengths to hide that from the press. So we should assume there are a lot of people who've been interviewed who just don't want to go tell the press, hey, I've been interviewed. But I also think we just can't conceptualize the real scope of this investigation.
Do you think like Jared and Ivanka have been interviewed?
Jared has. We know that. And Jared has because he was interviewed right before Mike Flynn slipped. He was basically given an opportunity to say, yeah, Mike Flynn was doing what he was told to do. And for whatever reason, Jared Kushner's answers were not enough to give Mike Flynn comfort that he would be protected. And that's what that is like the precipitating event that led to Mike Flynn slipping on Jared's father-in-law. And I suspect it's possible Jared got brought back in a second time. But look, I think Jared is a target, so you don't want to bring him in too often.
Right. That's what I guess I'm getting at, is to find out, like, is there any way to read any of these tea leaves? Like, wow, it's weird that Ivanka hasn't been in, or are they just sort of saving, the ultimate targets for the end when they know everything there is to know, or they think they do?
Yeah, and like Roger Stone is a better example because we know, because he told, was it CNN this weekend, that 8 of his closest associates have been interviewed. And again, I can think of at least one non-public source that I know who has been interviewed about Stone in recent weeks. So there's been a ton of interviews about Roger Stone, and he's never going to be interviewed by Mueller because Mueller has him targeted. At least that is what all of the tea leaves say. And so, either Mueller has enough to charge him or doesn't have enough to charge him. But if he has enough to charge him, he's not going to give Roger Stone. I mean, why would you with Roger Stone anyway? Because the guy can't string 3 sentences together. But, he's not going to give Roger Stone an opportunity to claim that he was entrapped or anything like that. He's just going to move to charges. And I suspect that's what Mueller would like to do with Don Jr. and with Jared to the extent, he's interviewed him once. But and then he'll throw in Paul Manafort. He hasn't interviewed Cohen, same gig. I think that's where this is going. I can't promise you. I don't know what Robert Mueller has in his pocket, but that's sort of where he seems to be headed.
And it seems to me, and I just want to get your take on this, that we're not going to see any resolution of any of this in any sort of significant way before the November election, right? I mean, this is not going to be a James Comey letter part deux here. Right?
Well, that's a false analogy in any case. Name any of the people we just talked about who are on the ballot in the fall.
Right. I mean, I guess right. Okay, fair enough.
Right. I mean, literally the only person who I think might be in some kind of legal jeopardy that's on the ballot in the fall is Ron DeSantis. He's one of the members of Congress who has been running interference for Trump. He's also probably one of the Republicans who most easily be shown to have benefited from the hack and leak because of the way the Guccifer figure leaked files to Republicans in Florida, and they got a bunch of Oppo research in Florida. I don't think he has legal liability, but nevertheless, he's the only person I can think of on the ballot who's got both like real involvement in the scandal and also a significant role in November's election if he wins the primary. So so it is a false notion to say that the entire Republican Party can benefit from shutting down the legal system just because the leader of it is under active investigation. I also don't think it's going to take that long for stuff to start coming down. I mean, Trump's people are trying to stall right now with this interview negotiation. I think, Mueller is probably happy to continue that dance so long as he's putting getting the Cohen stuff in order, and we'll see whether Manafort's case in D.C. is definitely going forward.
Wasn't that scheduled
waiting to hear
originally to start now, or is it already underway? I thought I had it somewhere in my calendar like early May.
Yeah, they tried. It's October right now. So again, right now the court system has said there will be an active investigation of Trump's campaign manager during the campaign season. But he's also scheduled to go on trial in July in Virginia. There's a bit of a delay there, so actually the case might get delayed there. But we'll see what the judge in that case wants to do with Manafort's latest challenges. He's the guy who famously beat up Mueller's prosecutors, though I don't think that that's that big of a deal in any case. So in other words, we're going to see whether Manafort continues to fight, or whether Manafort, the other person who flipped this week, is Manafort's son-in-law in a case in Los Angeles. So even more evidence, even more weight against Manafort. And, I sort of feel like Mueller is going to pressure him and try and get him to flip because it's a lot easier than going to trial. But understand that the cases against Manafort are what are called paper cases. It's just accounting, right? All you got to do is walk a jury through how money moved from one place to another in a way that's illegal. And those, as I understand it, not a lawyer, tend to be a lot easier to prosecute because you don't have to rely on the credibility of any witnesses. It's all on paper. And those charges, if he's found guilty, will put him in prison for the rest of his life. So the question is whether he really wants to go through with that process or whether he wants to flip and provide Mueller with information about precisely how he and understand even the leaked questions that Jay Sekulow wrote down about what Mueller is interested in. It's pretty clear that Manafort himself asked the Russians for help. So what Trump is interested in is talking to Manafort and learning from him personally whether his requests to the Russians for help on behalf of the Trump campaign, whether he shared those with Trump or not. And that's sort of where he's going with Manafort.